Chapter 1. Jesse's Burden. The campfire crackled softly in the dead of night, casting fleeting shadows over the faces of the Southline drifters. Jesse Calloway sat apart from the others, his back leaning against an old, withered tree, staring into the flames. The moon hung low and heavy in the night sky, a silver disk that illuminated the open plains, stretching out for miles in every direction. Despite the stillness of the night, Jesse's mind was restless, running in circles like a caged animal. He reached down to his side, pulling out a flask, his fingers brushing the worn leather holster of his revolver as he did. The weight of it felt as heavy as his thoughts. He unscrewed the flask, took a long drink, and let the whiskey burn his way down. It wasn't enough to drown out the memories, but it softened the edges just enough. His mind wandered back to Elmsbrook, the town he grew up in, a place so far behind him now it felt like a dream. He hadn't thought about it in months, maybe even longer, but now, sitting alone by the fire, the memories came creeping back like an unwanted visitor. The sound of the river winding lazily through the valley, the dusty streets where kids played barefoot, and then there was Royce Turner. Jesse's jaw tightened at the thought of him. Royce had always been a good man, at least everyone said so. Respected, a pillar of the community. But that didn't matter now, not anymore. It had happened in the summer, the heat bearing down on the town like an oppressive weight. Jesse had been 16, wild and impulsive, always looking for a fight. He never could explain what exactly led to that argument with Royce that night. Maybe it had been a few mini drinks over some careless words exchanged. Jesse wasn't even sure anymore. All he remembered was that moment it all went wrong. The flash of anger in Royce's eyes, the sharp sound of his fist hitting flesh, then the cold realization that Royce wasn't getting back up. Jesse had stood over him, panting, blood still dripping from his knuckles. Royce's body was crumpled on the bar floor, eyes wide open, but lifeless, a thin trail of blood seeping from the corner of his mouth. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Jesse had ever heard. He ran. There was no trial, no explanation, no goodbyes. Just the sight of the town disappearing behind him. As he rode hard, not daring to look back, the only thing waiting for him in Elmsbrook was a noose. Jesse shook his head, trying to shake off the memory, but even out here, thousands of miles from that dusty little town, it clung to him like a shadow. He never said it out loud, but the weight of that night had never left him. He'd killed a man, and no matter how many miles he put between himself and Elmsbrook, that was a stain that never washed clean. Thinking about the past again? The voice startled Jesse, pulling him back to the present. Hank Weston had appeared silently behind him, dropping down to sit on the log across from him. Hank had a way of knowing when Jesse's mind wandered too far, kind of sixth sense. The man was calm as the evening breeze, steady as the mountains that framed the horizon. Jesse grunted in response, tipping his flask toward Hank, offering. Hank waved it off. Just thinking, I guess, Jesse muttered, turning his gaze back to the fire. You're always thinking, boss, Hank replied, stretching his legs out. That's what keeps you sharp. Jesse let out a chuckle. Sharp enough to keep us all out of the noose for now, anyway. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the crackle of the fire, the distant hoot of an owl somewhere in the trees. Jesse appreciated that about Hank. He never pushed for conversation, never pried. The man understood that silence could speak louder than words sometimes. After a few moments, Hank broke it again. What's on your mind, Elmsbrook? Jesse shrugged, taking another swig from the flask. It ain't ever far from my mind, Hank. No matter how much dirt I put in between me and that place, it stays with me. Hank nodded thoughtfully. He heard pieces of the story before, though Jesse never gave him the full picture. Ain't nothing you can do about the past, Jesse. But we got a future to worry about. Jesse grunted again, this time with a bit more bitterness. A future? Like what? A little plot of land and a nice quiet life? I've been preaching about that to the group, but you and I know it ain't in the cards, Hank. Not for me, at least. Hank leaned forward, poking at the fire with a stick. You talk a lot about finding a place for us to settle. What if it's just not talk? Riverton's got potential. Could lay low there for a bit and see opportunities, see if they come our way at least. Opportunities? Jesse scoffed. More like chances to end up dead or behind bars. Hank's calm gaze met Jesse's steady and patient. Might be true, but the group believes in you, Jesse. You're what's keeping us together. What's keeping us alive. Jesse stared into the flames, the weight of Hank's words settling on him. He'd never asked for this. He hadn't set out to be anyone's leader. Hell, some days he didn't even want to be. But these people, they depended on him. Each one of them had a story like his, running from something, trying to carve out their own place in the world that didn't want them. He thought of Sadie, found half dead and broken after her boyfriend nearly killed her. Of Duster, who didn't even have a name. Of Carl, Lou, Bart, Preston, and Dale, each of them carrying their own burdens, each of them looking to Jesse to lead the way. And what was Jesse leading them toward? Freedom? Or just another noose waiting around the next bend? I'm not sure if I'm the man they think I am, Hank, Jesse admitted softly. Hank's voice was firm but kind. Well, they don't know what I know. You're the one fit to lead, Jesse. You got the smarts, the guts, the rest? Hell, it's just a matter of figuring out what you really want. Jesse's grip tightened around the flask. What did he really want? The words, a place to settle, felt hollow, like a lie he'd been trying to tell himself. The truth was, he loved the thrill of it all, the freedom of the open plains, the adrenaline of every single heist, the feeling of being untouchable, even just for a moment. But that same thrill could get them all killed. I don't know if that place even exists, Jesse muttered. Not for men like us. Hank chuckled softly. Maybe not, but it's a hell of a ride trying to find it. Jesse let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding in. Hank was right about one thing. The ride was all they had. Whether they had found a place to call their own or went down in a hail of bullets, Jesse would make sure they did it together. As long as he was breathing, the Southline drifters would stay together. Hank stood, dusting off his pants. Well, boss, we'll talk in the morning. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we ride. Jesse watched him walk back to the camp, his figure blending into the shadows, only until the sound of his footsteps remained. For a moment, Jesse considered following his advice, laying down by the fire like the rest of the group, and closing his eyes. But sleep never came easy to Jesse, not with all he carried. Instead, he sat alone at the fire, burning low as his past and future weighed heavy on his soul. End of chapter 1.